Welcome to everybody. Let's get going. Good morning and good evening, depending on where you are. And welcome to this 9th session of our series on emergent practices in South Asia. It's quite remarkable. This is going to be the 17th and 18th practitioner participating in this 12-part series. So after this session, we have 3 more sessions and 6 more practitioners. The next session will be on the 4th of March with Sonam Lethu and Sadiq Daud, Sonam from Bhutan and Sadiq from Afghanistan. Today we have speakers from Pakistan and Bangladesh, Coalesce Design Studio, Salman Javed, and Paraa, which is going to be represented by Ruhul Abdin. So thank you again for being with us. And these conversations have truly been remarkable. I mean, not only I believe remarkable and educative because we are looking at practices across the countries in South Asia. So while it is a region that has many commonalities, there are clearly many differences that also emerge. But I think more than that, to hear the voices of practitioners sort of under 40 emergent practices that are trying to establish new formations of practice itself has been really, at least for me personally, incredibly fascinating because it is pointing towards the kind of inventiveness and innovation that young practitioners are beginning to undertake to connect to the context they work in. And this sort of not only is an indicator and a pulse for all of us about the emergent issues, but also is representative of a spectrum of aspirations for a new generation of practitioners. And I think our speakers today will also expose us to some of these questions, issues, and challenges, and also show us how they've responded to these conditions. So really welcome again to everyone. And I'm going to quickly do very brief introductions for the 2 speakers, and then we'll jump into these presentations. Salman Javed from Coalesce Design Studios will go first, and Ruhul will follow him. So Coalesce Design Studios, Salman Javed, he studied at the Indus Valley School of Architecture in Karachi and formed in 2008. He co-founded Coalesce Design, which has been positioned, or their interest is a multi-disciplinary practice. And they're interested in both the intangible aspects of not only built spaces, public spaces, but also products as design. They actually work across the spectrum in industrial design, also in architectural design, and their products have been showcased internationally, including in places like Dubai, in the London Biennale, in the Saudi Design Week in Riyadh, and largely in that region, but also in Europe. He has also been connected to the world of academia, and he's been serving as he's been serving on the executive committees and has been teaching at the Karachi University for about 10 years now. He curated the Pakistan Pavilion at Dubai in the Design Week in 2015 and at the London Design Biennale in 2016, and has been participating in many such sort of fora internationally. But most importantly, and this is really, I think, an important contribution, he was part of the design team that organized the first national pavilion of Pakistan at the Venice Biennale. This was the 2018 Venice Biennale, and I happened to have the good fortune of seeing this. It was a very prominent location, and it blurred the kind of boundaries between an installation, a piece of public space, as a public engagement installation right at the entrance, really, of the Biennale. So congratulations, belated congratulations on that. Paraa is a critical design and research studio focusing on enhancing spaces with communities in Bangladesh and beyond through multidisciplinary practice. And it was conceptualized in 2011 as a social enterprise, and it was led by artist Ruhul Abdin, who's going to speak to us, architect Qazi Arfin, with the support from film producer Abbas Nokastesh. The studio is based in Dhaka in Bangladesh, and is currently in the process of opening a neighborhood-centered art space near the studio. And so this is a very interesting model of practice in that they are engaged in advocacy, training, communication, research. They work with communities in bridging the gaps between what might be practitioners and actual users and communities. And so it's a very particular model of practice where the process of workshops and participatory strategic planning, etc., including exhibition seminars, so also blurring what we might normally do in the academy versus hands-on engagement with communities. So I think what's interesting about both these practices, as we've seen also in many other practices, is these searches, so to speak, of what might be the appropriate way to give agency to architecture and design, and those connections with constituencies and users that need these services the most. So we really look forward to these two presentations. Thank you both for joining us, Salman and Rahul. And with that, Salman, I'm going to hand it over to you so you can share your screen and share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And we are really excited to be a part of this amazing endeavor with these talented individuals. I am today representing Coalesce Design Studio and my partners and my firm. And the whole idea is to showcase what our firm is all about and how we started. And that's why the idea is creativity and collaboration, which is the main idea of Coalesce Design Studio. So starting from the name, Coalesce Design Studio, it literally means amalgamation, things coming together. Started with 5 partners with different backgrounds and different interests. And we started with the idea of forming a holistic design approach. And as the name suggests, the idea was to amalgamate, to grow together, to unite, and to unite for a common goal. And we work together, we study together at Indus Valley together. And as students, we enjoyed the studio practice, and we wanted to maintain that when we formed our own company. And we started this in 2008. And the whole idea of collaboration is not just between us; it is also between our teams. As we grow, so does the collaboration internally and externally, and it gave us a lot of opportunities with different projects. Jumping in, so like previously it was mentioned that we are a multidisciplinary firm, a multifaceted firm, where we're also looking at architecture, interior, product design, and graphic. And I will be just giving examples of some of these projects that truly represent what we really what our work is all about. Our architecture projects range from beach houses to residential projects to commercial projects and institutional buildings. But I would like to start from this first project, the Kapadia residence, which was a very interesting project and one of our first houses. So what makes it interesting is that my partner was building his own house, and the client was his own family, where we had to work with 2 households, another brother and a father, and they were basically our main clients. So we got an opportunity to really express our design philosophy. And in this house, as you can see, it was an apartment style house where 2 families are stacked upon each other, and one entrance is from the ground floor, and one is from the axial through the axial staircase. And the inspiration was of a beach house where light is in abundance and the wind is weaving through the southwest. And we really got to express our design philosophy. And it was a very simple plan based on a 15 by 15 grid. And keeping the budget in mind, we had to make sure that the design was really practical with flexibility to grow later on as the family grew. And as you can see, there are lots of open spaces. And one interesting thing about this house was there was no boundary wall, which really connected with the context and gave an example of how residences could be designed here. You can see, well, as there were two brothers, there was one basement was given to the ground, to the brother on the ground floor, and the first floor and the roof terrace was given to the other brother on the first floor. So, they're like, there's privacy within the spaces and from the external street, where the use of the screen brings in the light and wind and also blocks the views. This was our first breakthrough project, I would say, because it gave us the opportunity to showcase this all over the world, and was featured in a few books and publications. This is an example. Another project that we wanted to talk about was a recent project during COVID-19, when everything was shut down. This really truly shows what kind of firm we are, where we're looking to solve problems that are being faced in practices, and especially COVID was one of the biggest issues that we could face in the past few years. So what we came up with was a pandemic response where we were suggesting a blockchain-based rapid manufacturing system so that they could make a massive factory. So we based it on a 4x8 modular system, because that is the module that most of the people in Karachi and in our country work with. And rather than one factory, we wanted to make an opportunity where different people from different parts of the city could collaborate and create these, produce these structures with an open source approach, and it could adapt and evolve and scale as per the need, and it was also, you could transport easily. So this is something which we worked on during COVID-19. We had the opportunity to work with the government, and this just shows that how ICUs could be built, how general wards could be built, testing labs, and how each module could be stacked and transported easily, and in different parts of the city, they could collaborate and work together. As mentioned before, we also do interior design. These are just some examples of projects where there are restaurants and corporate interiors, where we really like to work with creating an identity, which is something which we really focus on as a firm. And the main thing is the design approach, how we look at these projects and how to create these opportunities, or how to solve these problems that we face. An example of Newbury Cafe in Karachi, where the exterior and interior was merged together. Residential interiors, where we worked with the old renovation and wanted to create a contrast with adding more details. So even in the residences and in our commercial projects, we really like to work with the client and not for the client, and try to extract the brief very carefully, and then apply our principles and our design approach to each of these projects. Another example of a restaurant in Myanmar, where again you can see the elements of graphic also coming into play. And in this restaurant, we wanted to really frame the sunset and the sunrise and the different views of the sea. Coming to product design, this is something which is very important, and I wanted to discuss how this became an opportunity for us. So we started in 2008, and it was a time of a global recession where there were lots of large firms also scaling down. It wasn't the best time to start a practice, but since we had been freelancing and working before that, we were really encouraged by what we saw. So product design is something where we thought that we could create our own opportunity, because unlike architecture and interior design, where it depends on a lot of other factors and clients and a budget, in product design we got to express and showcase what we really think, and express our design and our philosophy, where we could control this. So we got an opportunity, and our first exhibition was actually in New Delhi, and at the Prakriti Maidan, where there was a showcase of Pakistani design, and we got the opportunity to do that. And this was the first time we actually collaborated with someone from outside our firm, where Zaid Hamid, a textile designer who also works with Hala Pottery. We interacted, we collaborated with him and came up with the idea of BED, which was our first product design exhibition, where we designed these products, where it was really like a studio assignment for us, where all of us partners work with the same material, work with the same rules that we set from the beginning, and work with Zaid, and collaborated in making these chess tables and lights. And it was really our first opportunity that we got to express this in scale of products. We made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot, opened a workshop, which really led to a lot of exciting things later on. Then we got a chance to showcase at the Design Days in Dubai 2014, and really our work was put in front of a global audience, where there was like Philippe Stark, Zaha Hadid, Nada Debs, Karim Rashid from the region. So it really gave us a very big boost, and we really evolved our products further. From the very beginning, where there was more craft involved, it started to evolve into more simpler, more eloquent products like the Joe table or the Zavia table, which was very well received. And again, this really shows the evolution, and the experience that we had was immense. Some of the features that we of our products. Leading to Design Days 2015, where we did the Pakistan Pavilion. Again, this is one of our really important projects. And again, this really shows what Coalesce is all about, where we are constantly collaborating between our teams and different people. So here we got the opportunity to curate the Pakistan Pavilion, which we because childhood games, we took inspiration from our childhood games, and we wanted to represent that. So here we collaborated with 2 graphic designers, 2 textile designers, to create one space, one dalan, the whole idea, which literally means a courtyard, where we wanted to express and showcase our designs. So this was the dalan pavilion in Dubai. So we started sketching our games. We worked with an artist who sketched a lot of these movements, and then started picking elements from craft, from textile, from truck art, from basant, from different experiences, and then merged it. The graphic designers then turned it into screens that were later screen printed with natural henna. To create this different experience and to really get the earthy feel. And then we later made these products which were about, like a lattu stool, which is like a spinning top, a kancha table made with found objects, because that truly represented our games, which were dependent on people, not really strict rules. The whole idea was just to have fun, and that is what we wanted to translate. And then later on, it translates into a space where it literally turns into a dalan, where strangers could meet and play these games. This is an example of some images. Then the lattu stool, which was first designed during the dalan experience, the Pakistan Pavilion. We've made more designs of it, because I thought that this product was something which spoke to everyone. It was, I feel that a success of a product depends on how many people can connect with it, how you make a personal connection with it. And I felt the lattu was something which did that. People told us different names, whoever would come to see it and sit and spin on it. So it was very well received, and it was also, really represents our design ideology, where we're doing something contemporary, but still, it is coming from the cultural elements. Some examples of the lattu stools. And this was then later, this exhibition was then later taken to London at the first inaugural London Design Biennale. some more examples of the Lattu stools in 2017. So product is something which I really wanted to focus on, how we kind of created an opportunity for ourselves and to show how in these little details we were able to showcase our design while we were growing, and so were our projects. So I think it really gave us a good understanding, and since we had a workshop, we really worked with minor details, and we really learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, but learned a lot in the process as well. Then finally coming to the Fold, the Biennale Venezia in 2018, the first Pakistan Pavilion. So after London, we got an opportunity and we were approached by the Global Art Foundation and the European Culture Council, and they wanted to take us to Venice. That was the first time me and my partner also got to see the Biennale in 2016. And then we were there in the next one in 2018. It was one of the most challenging projects that we've ever done, because we had to put this up in 6 months, from the design to conception to transportation. And since we chose to do the Pakistan Pavilion, we were responsible for the funding and everything as well. And we did not get any support from the government, but we got a lot of support from the architecture fraternity, our seniors, from alumni, from Khadi, and we really made this happen. And it could only happen because we worked as a team. So in this case, we had to also appoint a curator and a government body that would then talk to the Biennale. But in the end, it all worked out. Our team comprises of Bilal and Mustafa from Coalesce, and Zeba, Sami, and Duri Alvi from Indus Valley. At the time, Sami was heading the architecture department, and Duri is still teaching at the Indus Valley. So the whole concept of 2018 was free space, and when we started to explore this idea, we started to look at our immediate context, which is Karachi. And when you look at Karachi, 2/3 of the population really lives in 1/3 of the land, and there's a lot of densely populated areas, regular and irregular developments. So we started looking at the physical and social dimensions in these sparsely open spaces and these informal settlements. And when this is an example of the different densities that you find in Karachi. This is a Google Earth image. And we started looking at these really densely populated areas and these informal settlements and these narrow streets that got fractured light. They were all interconnected because sometimes neighboring walls would be supporting the structure next door. So we started to look at the activities here, and though it might look like they're very densely populated and there's nothing happening here, but everything happens on these streets. This is an example of how Karachi has been going and how these areas have been forming, these informal settlements. Just some illustrations that will be a part of a book releasing very soon. So this is just illustrating how it is interconnected, how these areas are just walked together. And all of these really tight alleys, how these are forming, places of interaction, and how sometimes play is happening over here, the exchange of ideas are happening over here. It's a very restrictive, but yet a democratic space. A section just showing different activities on the street that takes place during the hours, and just a few sketches of how people use these spaces with the fractured light and very tight spaces. Again, some illustrations depicting this, how these small boxes are being used and are interconnected. So we started taking cues from this and then wanted to translate into, and what we came towards was that in our culture and in our context, free space only works when people are in agreement with each other, and does not really work when they're not in agreement with each other. And that is what the main idea was, to showcase a free space as a consequence of unity, of mutuality, and of harmony, and to showcase these layers. So the whole idea of the fold came into being, where we looked at these, what we wanted to translate this into with vertical elements and a structure that was interconnected, like these informal settlements are, and something which looks like it is very closed up initially, but while you approach it, it starts to open up. And again, in this restricted area, we wanted to create some activity which would really showcase, which would really capture the essence that we set out to do. So what we decided to do was to place 4 swings in the middle of this space in the gardens of Marina Ressa, and also design these benches that were also like a seesaw. So again, when we spoke, so they could only work when people work together, a space that works when people work together. And these swings really made you interact with the people sitting right, and actually that interaction will lead to something more. And again, the seesaw bench, for instance, there's something very democratic about a seesaw. Like as children, we've all used it, but it is like an initial agreement where someone says, okay, I'm going to go up and you're going to go down. And that is something. So we found that we weren't really romanticizing what the situation in Karachi is, but we wanted to show how we are making it work, and to really translate that into architecture. And again, this project really shows how our team working together, we actually ended up doing the setup in 1 day because our shipment was late. But that again was a story in itself. And we managed to pull it through. That is one of the images of the pavilion. And as you can see that initially it looks very closed up. But when you approach it, you can see the 4 swings in the center. And it would be really interesting because when you're approaching it, you could hear, you can listen to a lot of laughter, a lot of kids who would love to come here. And especially because it was placed in a public space, we really enjoyed a lot of, oncomers who were not even there for the Biennale. The image, this shows the seesaw bench, the structure, the views from inside, the layering that I was talking about, and the structural elements, how all of these are tied together, just like the informal settlement. One of our great visitors, Daniel Epstein, was also there because we were at the opening together and shared the same space. Some glimpses of how the pavilion was used throughout the 8 months that it was there. And again, it was an overwhelming experience, and we learned so much from this experience. Just showing that there will be a book launch next month, and hopefully we will be sharing this with you guys. And I think that's about it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Salman. Thank you very much. Yeah, and we'll of course pick up in the discussion, but as Ruhul shares his screen, I'll just very quickly say that it would be nice in the conversation to hear a little more about your COVID pavilions. And because there's a whole, I mean, it's very interesting if I, in my mind, juxtapose what you did for that, what blockchain-based rapid deployment and manufacturing kind of pavilion, and then what you do at Venice. I want to try to have a conversation where the two talk to each other. So I'm just giving you a heads up that we'd like to hear more about that COVID pavilion. So Ruhul, are you ready to share your screen and start?
I just need 1 more minute.
Okay.
Sorry, just downloading a file. Just 30 seconds, sorry.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll start. I'm just waiting for a second while the file downloads. Thank you very much to you all for inviting Paraa to come speak. I actually wanted Arifin to do this presentation, but he sadly has been very busy, but we've also been reflecting this year because it's about 10 years of Paraa's work. And we've had a lot of different projects over the years, going across from research to design to art to installations to architectural buildings.
Thank you. We don't see anything, yeah? Ruhul? Okay, I think we've lost them.
Apologies there.
Okay. If you can go full screen and yeah.
I'm very sorry about that. I just had a very quick power
Okay,
outage on the
good.
other laptop.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So I'll be brief and I'll keep it short again. I was just saying this is 10 years of sort of Paraa's work, and we've been sort of going across so many different creative projects rooted in and around architecture. And as Rahul said right at the beginning, we've really sort of been thinking about being a studio that's very much a school of thought. So where we are teaching, where we are doing, we're also sort of really aiming to research within the projects that we work on. And we often have taken our own research kind of interests in the projects we've been doing beyond sort of often what the client might want or what is needed from an architectural brief. And that's been one of our biggest learnings really and challenges, is to sort of to do the research required, the requisite research required to develop projects, especially when they take contexts of informality or tight spaces or issues that may be related to disability or other vulnerabilities. Just a very quick overview of Bangladesh for those that don't know much about Bangladesh. It's a big, dense country. There's more, probably now up to 200 million people in this country as well. And we're one of the countries that is going to be seriously impacted by the environmental issues regarding climate change due to the low-lying lands. And at the same time, we've been based in Dhaka, which is one of the most dense cities in the world. And also it lacks a lot of public spaces and clean air. And I think it's really important to understand, as a studio, we've been really focusing on working with communities, working with people in a very aggressive, I would say, participatory kind of collaborative process. And our studio has allowed us to invite people to our studio. We've hosted workshops, we host events, we host activities, etc. And I've just been sort of reflecting over the last 2 weeks, actually, how to keep this concise. And I think Rahul and I spoke very briefly about not going into everything that the studio does, but really honing in on 2 or 3 projects. So I think these 2 or 3 projects that are architectural focus probably best explain the challenges we face in being this kind of studio, but also kind of the impact we have when we are able to create these kinds of projects as well. So the bamboo play space was a temporary kind of installation for about 2-3 years. It's a charity we've been working with, a children's charity that's been working with rescuing and supporting children in and around Dhaka city, especially kind of the boat terminals, the bus terminals, etc. And when we first started working with this charity back in 2013-14, they had asked us to do an intervention, which was for a children's shelter, a new orphanage that they wanted to build in Shadargat. And the challenge there was that the client or the charity that was financing this particular project wanted to house 100 children in a space of about 1,000 square feet. So we sort of put our, we sort of really dug in and said, this is unethical, this is not safe. Just because you've got money doesn't mean you can create a, a cage for kids. And so we went out of our way to then do extra research, go out in the streets, even understand from a spatial experience how children navigate the cities, especially these vulnerable children who may be living on the boat side or living in a car park or wherever they're staying. They often have to like group together, and especially even sort of young girls who are, going through various abuses, and boys too. So one of the things that came out of all of that was, they did not like dark spaces. They did not want to be in a caged space or a cage environment. I sadly won't go into detail of that particular project, but we've been working with this charity, and over the years, they built a home, an orphanage of themselves in Bosila Mohammadpur. And alongside this, they had all these empty plots. These are all residential plots that are, will be built up on soon. And we sort of floated the idea when we initially started thinking about teaching, how we could teach and also build something. And so we floated this idea of a sort of a small bamboo workshop with architecture students and bamboo artisans and designing something for the children. And this is sort of the second iteration of this particular project. This was in 2018 when we had fully launched our teaching program with Independent University of Bangladesh. And what was really amazing was that we were able to secure this land. It was land directly next door. So where the white dotted lines were, that was the initial site, but actually we sort of tried to get all 3 plots, but that was not available in the end. But the land owner kindly donated the land to use for 3-5 years, whatever it was that we had it for. And one of the challenges then was to get them to give it in writing. So the politics of all land is quite aggressive, quite volatile. But the charity has been amazing in securing this kind of very particular sensitive plot. And a lot of our work is using as much as we can multiple methods of participation. And over the years, we've worked closely with different groups of people, but also what we've learned is that, the design methods that exist often are not adaptable. So we've had to be really sharp in sort of honing our own methods within each context. Working with vulnerable urban children versus working with homeless women are 2 completely different contexts versus working in an informal settlement like Coalesce. And so we've had to continuously come up with methods that are appropriate, but also participatory. And this has been really challenging when we know often people do not understand the conversations that we have in language form. So it has to go into models, it has to go into drawings, it has to also be models and drawings that they can imagine themselves in. So we've been sort of for this particular project, we created sort of a 1 to 10, 1 to 5 scale models and immersed images of the children into the bamboo structure. And only then could they really understand actually, oh, this is a play thing that is going to be built and this is how it's going to be experienced. And these kind of visual kind of methods have been very powerful for us because then it doesn't require us to make hundreds and thousands of presentations, but we really just are engaging with the children without wasting time. A lot of the mapping and the research and the social kind of issues that arise in doing these workshops also need to be addressed in the final kind of design presentation. And I think when we talk to young girls, they talk a lot about having a safe space just for them to be themselves. Yes, there are other kids, yes, there are other boys, but they often talk about the fact that they just want to hang out by themselves and not be troubled. And I think what happens is when we are engaging with the children. One of the big things that was raised about disability. So this children's charity has, I think, 20 to 30% of children who have different, forms of disability. And one of the children was and is wheelchair bound. And so all the children sort of gathered around and said, you guys built something last time, it wasn't accessible enough. Can you make sure this time around when you build this, that Shamim can go up the ramp, right to the top, because he also wants to go up to the top and hang out with us. And the project itself was very hands-on. It was part of our teaching program. These were some of the architecture students who, along with the bamboo artisans, we built this together. So kind of, it's hard to imagine, but this was all done within sort of a 3-month time frame. And with a very, very small budget. It was very hands-on. We had about 50 volunteers in the end from the architecture schools, from our own community, from the team, the artisans themselves. And in the end, we designed something that sort of came from 2 architecture schools. So we held a sort of a design challenge as part of our teaching program. And the BRAC University students and Buet University students were picked to be favorites by the children, but they had very, very drastically different propositions. So although I don't have this in vision form here, but this is the final kind of design, there was one, what was really then challenging for us was to spend 2 weeks getting these architecture students and our team, especially led by Arifin and Mahmouda, to make something out of all of that and create something that is actually physically buildable within a month. So it ended up being a 3-tier kind of structure with ramps going all the way to the top, and almost like a nest. And so the yellow ramp you see goes all the way around, wraps around to various platforms. And then the blue climbing wall goes up to another platform. And then the blue rope that you saw earlier, we put in a big spider climbing frame that anyone can and everyone can use as they want. So it ended up looking like this in section form. And it was really heavily used. So we tried to go as high as we could. So we went up to about 25 feet, with the rest of the structure going up to about 35. And working with bamboo, as a material has been rewarding because it's something that can be quickly put together, but also has the aesthetics that I think lends itself in a way that I think other materials do not. The versatility of bamboo is amazing. And I think it's something I think that has not been fully utilized in Bangladesh to push its limits. So we always think, whatever we do should try and push the design boundaries as much as everything else. So it's sort of in the final stages of this, of the build phase. So we you see the tent on the right of the picture. That's where it was the workshop basically. We're just literally there 6 in the morning till about 10 at night, working away. And we were on site, the artisans were on site. And the children were also around. The children were very involved in sort of providing juices and sort of keeping morale up. And so they were also very, very involved in watching this thing go from complete zero to, fully physically built. And as I was saying earlier, this idea that Shamim needed also to go up and use this space as well, as much as everybody else, was taken into consideration. And as a studio, we also think about, the wider use of space potentially. So we opened the whole entire space with an arts festival, which included fashion shows, which also included a really amazing theater production by the children themselves, and included artists who then did interactive site-specific kind of installations as well. And this was sort of on the opening night, so as part of the theater presentation. And this is sort of just on an everyday basis. The 2 years that it was there, it was always packed with all of the kids. And one of our biggest takeaways from this was the way that the children from the shelter were stigmatized by the community children. And one of the issues was about sort of safety, security, and fencing this. So as you can see, we didn't put a fence around it. We wanted the community to use it with the children of the charity. And Farhad, by the charity director, sort of came back at the end of it all and just said, Rohul, you guys have done something that has allowed me to engage and sensitize the neighborhood about who these children are. And I think the power of architecture then in itself is really, really important to take note that this structure allowed the children of the organization, of the charity, to then be seen as equal as to the neighborhood kids. Okay, and sort of jumping from that to a very different but similar project is the Amro Manush Pavement Dwelling Center. And this was again a client. It was a foundation called Sajida Foundation in cooperation with the City Corporation and WaterAid. And I think Concern Worldwide was financing this. But one of the challenges we faced in this particular project, it was meant to be a shelter for homeless women and their children, with a daycare facilities, with a medical room, with a games room, with a training room, with lots of bathrooms, etc., etc., etc. And the project was already built, constructed in terms of the structure. And they'd sort of brought us in to say, can you fix this? And they'd already built all these things in terms of programs that I described. They'd already built these rooms. So there was like a room which was like 6x6 for the medical room. There's a room 6x6 for the training room. There's a room 6x6 for the medical, etc. So it's like all these little boxes of rooms were in this project. And so our challenge was to really convince the client to demolish what they'd already started and just go back to the bare bones and start again. And they had said, how do you mean? And so we said, we are going to work with the users of this new building and work with them to design what are the programs and how they should function together. So a lot of the homeless women, the young boys, talked a lot about how they use space. So the chalk drawings you see were them mapping how much space they need for sitting, how much space they need for playing, how much space they need for working, just so that the client could understand actually what they've already built isn't sufficient and doesn't work. And then there was a list of things they wanted. And one of the most important things that we had sort of got from these exercises was that they wanted access to an open space as you enter the building, rather than all these box rooms. The other big thing they talked a lot about, because a lot of the people were living in and around precarious homes, many of whom were on the streets, was that they needed lots of bathrooms to be able to wash their clothes, wash their dishes, and also a big kitchen space where they can come and cook their food and also take it back home. So we ended up packing each floor with multiple bathrooms. And the other nice thing, which I think is sort of the softer kind of edge of the designing, was we worked with an artisan, a Jamdani motif artisan, and worked with the users to develop their own motifs. So we talked about motif and design, then we talked about how they could design their own motifs. And then we translated that into sort of a brick pattern and also embossed these kind of motifs that they had designed into the door. So these are, I think, soft architectural touches that I think enables us to value the users in more so than anything else. And then this is the building itself. So as I was saying, as you can see on the floor plans, there was a public toilet component to it, which was financed by WaterAid. So the white grill you see is a public toilet on the plan. So it's the left on the left of the plan. There's a whole bunch of bathrooms for the public, and again on the ground floor we sort of put the kitchen on the ground floor on the outside, and upstairs was just two big rooms separated by lockers, and then the rooftop was an addition because the charity wanted to put a tin roof on this, and they said, we don't need much, they're not going to be doing much in there, we just need a tin roof and they'll be fine. But then they said, oh, we actually want a training room for ourselves. So there was this weird kind of conversation of saying there isn't a budget, there's no money, you need to do it under this kind of strict timeline, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we also could not control the contractors. So one of the funniest challenges from this was that we wanted to work with materials and recycled materials. And the contractor went and literally bought brand new tiles and smashed them. And it was just like, why did you do that? It was just, so this kind of workmanship, craftsmanship issues, I think, will be something that we sort of face in projects that are not entirely in our control. And one of the most beautiful things in this building has been that the second floor, or the first floor technically, sorry, the first floor has these windows where children can also, as they're sitting down in the daycare, can also peep out and look through. And they're all functioning windows, so they all open up as well. And so it was really meant to be just an open, colorful, light space. And I think the biggest challenge that we faced was convincing the client that this is what they needed, not all these box rooms. And so this is sort of some of the images from the inside. So you see in the bottom center image, it's a top floor where they can do workshops, they can do conversations, they can hang out. It's very light. And we put a staircase. The staircase had sort of shelving, so they could, use it as sort of an impromptu gallery. They can highlight objects, art they've created, etc. And as you can see, sort of as I was mentioning, the broken tiles in the bathrooms in the mirror on the sort of center right image. These are all brand new tiles. We sort of talked a lot about sort of the aesthetic narrative for it, but we struggled a lot with getting the workmanship on this. So this is the front entrance. And the biggest challenge that the client had, it took them 3 years to get this land because it's city corporation land. And the challenge they had was they could not build anything permanent, which of course this is permanent, but it was something interesting, like where you could not, put deep foundations in. So they said, we can do a 2-story building and that's okay. The foundations are not going to be so deep, but if you go above that, we cannot give you the land. So it's only, again, an 1,100 square feet plot, which then functions now as a night shelter for the women, a daycare center for the children, for the women who need to drop them off. It does have a medical room, and it also has training spaces, and the ground floor is used by children, especially young boys. So upstairs is only accessible to the women and their children, and the ground floor is accessible to everybody. And I'll end very quickly on this project. I know I'm sort of running a little bit short on time. So just to sort of really, again, go back into sort of this public space design issue. The Mohsin Club is a club that just completed at the end of last year. They just opened. It's a sports club / sort of community gym, library space. And it was designed for the Epilion Foundation, so a very large set of garments conglomerates, a family foundation. And this is in Naranganj in Kanpur. And Arifin and Shihab and a few others who were leading this particular project, again, on a very, very tiny plot of land, trying to get it up to sort of 4 or 5 floors with a lot of open space, as much open space as you can imagine. So we really worked through the whole project in sections. So and it was important to really give volume to this kind of tiny plot and bring in light. And I think one of the challenges was to convince the client to use the materials that we specified. And I went and visited a couple of weeks back, and we were disappointed with, as architects, we want something to be beautiful from the outside and inside, and we want all these specifications to be met in terms of the interior. And what happens is that the client's brother or cousin who's decided to exercise his ego, he decides that he will choose the color palette, he will choose the lighting system. So what we propose then begins to morph into something else, almost like a vanity project for this other person. So there's a lot of fighting to make this happen, and to keep these open spaces. They were saying, we don't need all these empty spaces. We want floors of rooms. And again, just in a very basic section, you can sort of see how much light we'd sort of brought into this building. So this is the complete building on a very, very busy street. And it has sort of light coming wrapped all around it. There's small windows, very linear. We even had like a problem with getting sort of a net concrete finish because it was not within the budget. So we had to sort of find a relatively similar tile. So this is a tiled building that gives that illusion, but is not. And so this is a building in the end. So alongside the building is the sort of the football field. So we also sort of were involved in designing the football field to make a clean, neat kind of playground. And within that, there'll be an amphitheater as well. But this is a relationship between sort of the building and then the playground, sorry, the field. And as I was saying earlier, you know, bringing in as much light as possible into this building was sort of the most important task. And the features that I talked about, the interior design, as you see on the staircase, this kind of sort of hodgepodge kind of bits of shelving is there. The original idea was really to have a very neat kind of bookcase going all the way up along the staircase that was sort of there. But they just decided that that was not something they were going to do. And when we went in to ask them, they said, oh, of course we did. This is what you said. So despite giving them technical drawings, despite giving them construction drawings, despite showing them images, 3D visuals, they still decided, excuse me, to do what they want. Excuse me, sorry. But at the same time, the space is there to be used as the community wants. And this is the complete building at night. And we had a really beautiful comment the other day, and I'll end on this. We asked a local, excuse me, sorry. So we asked a local person, just as we were having a cup of tea, what do you think of this building? And he said, you know, this is Narayan-Ganj's Louis Khan's Parliament building. You know, he sort of really went off and said, this is as good as the Parliament complex in Dhaka, if not better, because we can all go in there and use it. Yeah. Sorry. I'll end on just 2 or 3 things that are coming forward. But so as Rahul mentioned, we are opening a really exciting project which amalgamates all of our work that we've been doing over the last couple of years into a neighborhood research art center that will then also collaborate with the artisans that we've been working with as part of our fashion project. And along with that, we're working in the Coalesce community, which is the largest informal settlement in Bangladesh. In a couple of weeks' time, we start doing another public intervention, which we hope to be even bigger than the bamboo. The plot is 4 times the size of the bamboo project. So we're really excited to be working in that community as well. So thank you, Rahul. I hope I didn't speak too much. And
thank you. No, this is great. Thank you. If you can stop sharing, we can then go into a conversation. There's some questions too, and Devashri will have some questions, but I want to just sort of offer some broad remarks. So if you can stop sharing your screen, please, Rahul. Thank you. Okay, Salman, you're on. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. So thank you very much for that, Rahul. You can hear us. We don't see you, but okay, there we go. Okay, great. No, thank you very much to both of you for your presentations. I'm just going to sort of try to, make some sort of observations, things that struck me, which were really fascinating. So I'll start with Paraa. And, and we can pick this up in the conversation. Some of these overlap maybe with the questions that sort of have come in since. I think what I was struck by were a few things. One was I was really struck by how the contractor bought new tiles and broke them because what he was pandering to, or he was responding to, what he perhaps understood as an aesthetic demand without the value you were bringing to that aesthetic demand, which was recycling. And that is very interesting because that also extends to participatory design generally, where usually designers allow a little bit of clumsiness and oddities and things because that's how it becomes the aesthetic of participation. But I was really struck by how the participatory inputs you abstracted through motives into diagrams, into demands for pragmatic things like more toilets, but put a lot of effort to bring a kind of precision to the building albeit many components coming together. But it shows and displays a kind of rigor in making it happen as as well as you can. It's not a project for the poor that is temporary, etc. And I think that's really commendable. And that really struck me as being very important, including the kinds of feedback you got from them, which is wonderful. The question I'd sort of, I think for both of you, I think the one thought that went through my mind was these are forms of cross-subsidized practices, cross-subsidized internally, because what you're doing is you're open to a spectrum of work, all the way from objects to building for the poor, building for the rich, in both your cases, responding to the COVID condition, which is almost like a self-initiated project, which must have been subsidized internally by the firm in terms of the time you put into it. And so both your practices seem to hint at this notion of internal cross-subsidies. And I think a number of the practitioners who've presented to us in this series seem to be implying that. And that is not a model that's discussed enough, because I think that is very critical if as architects we have to spread our skills and our services to a much broader spectrum in society. So in both your practices, I think this notion of an internal aspiration for an internal cross-subsidy comes in. And and one of the real purposes of a forum like this is to have folks like you with other participants discuss these issues while practices are in formation, because practices otherwise get locked into particular paradigms, and then there's no stopping you because you have responsibilities in terms of the structure of the practice. So thank you both for that, because I think that really does stand out as being very important in my mind. So Salman, I just want to I'm going to stay with your first and your last project, or your second and your last project, which is the pavilion, the blockchain-based rapid manufacturing and deployment response to COVID, and then your Venice pavilion. And of course, there were very beautiful things you showed us in between. Your Lattu stool is just really quite beautiful and a lovely idea. And many other things you all have done are incredibly beautiful. But I take that project for the COVID response and the Venice Pavilion for a couple of reasons. One is, in some ways, they're quite similar in terms of what they might do. And I'm interested in how, one is what happened. Did that ever get done? Or was it an idea? Why it didn't happen? I'd like you to reflect on that. But also, what struck me about the Venice Pavilion was the readings you made of the city, the kind of deep readings and layers of readings that you brought to a very simple object finally, right? Free space works when people are in agreement. So there's a kind of symbolism there. There's the seesaw and the swing, which is really symbolic, emblematic of how people adjust like this to each other's needs. You create a sense of enclosure, which comes from a kind of scalar response to the alleys of Karachi and how space is organized in the urban place, right? Now, I suppose if the COVID pavilion aggregation happened, you might have had the opportunity to bring some of those sensibilities. What you showed us diagrammatically was more like an industrial product. And then this is the unit, and this is how you network the components. This is how they aggregate into a settlement, right? But you didn't, of course, you didn't have the opportunity to challenge yourself with how even the object is speaking to the city and vice versa. And I think for me, Ruhul, in what you showed also, whether it's the playground for the children, the ramp, the amphitheater, the circulation, these are almost little, they're little, what do they call them? They're little kind of fragments that represent many aspects of the city that come together because you're both reading the city and the experiences of the city in your everyday lives. And so Ruhul, more precisely to you, I'd like to hear more about the kind of cross-subsidy and how consciously you do that? Or is that you're at the stage where you're just doing and responding to things and now you'll reflect about it? Or is there a conscious strategy? Because now you're also setting up an art center. What does that mean? Where does the funding come from? How will you run something like this? I think people would be very interested in knowing that. And with Salman, I'd like to kind of hear, what happened to the COVID response? Why didn't that get built, or did it get built? And two, in reflection, how, if they did have to get built, how might you extend it differently after many of your experiences? So Salman, you want to go first, please?
Yeah, I'd like to answer that one. So it did not get built, unfortunately. And like you said, that it was a response that we wanted to take, that because initially when COVID happened, it was nobody knew how to react to it. And every day the news would be changing and things would be changing very rapidly. So we want, as a firm, we were like for shutdown for more than 2 months actually. Completely. So we wanted to get together and work on an idea of how we could contribute and look at the situation in hand. And there was no as such mega factory that is there that is producing something like this. It's like, there's a fire and you're trying to dig a well to get water. That was the kind of a situation. That's the kind of analogy I would think would make sense. So we thought about how a modular system could work. And in the city, there are different workshops spread out in different parts of the city that are known for, woodworks, for metalworks, for sheets, and where you could get that supplies. So we wanted to start a system where they could collaborate on a simple 4x8 system, a module, because that is readily available. All the machines work based on that. Every sheet that we get over here is based on that size. So understanding the restrictions that we have and then responding to it and kind of making a mechanism where they could all come together. And because the issue was also that they needed beds every day, and then it would be something which would be set up and taken out when the need is taken away. A little bit like your presentation about the thermal cities at Venice as well, where you talk about the Kumbh Mela, how a festival happens and there is all, so it's kind of similar in the manner where these are temporary structures that need to be. So we wanted to work more on the practicality and the availability, and again what the contractors and auto vendors could produce, just like we saw on the other presentation, the issues that we face working with contractors and working with vendors of something new. And again, the whole idea of reusing something, or designing something that could be used again, opened up and placed somewhere else. So that is something which is new for this region, and we're still trying to fight. Working with prefabricated structures in harmony with nature. We're doing a lot of projects up north where we want to show how this could be done. So these are the challenges that we faced, and again, we can see that how all of us are impacted by the climate right now, especially the regions Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India. We have to be more responsible about the kind of designs that we do, and especially talk about wastage. And adding to that, like, it's very interesting when you compared Venice and the pavilion that we did over there. So when we were selected, there was an organization from Venice that was actually not really happy about the Biennale. They and they have every right to complain about the kind of wastage that happens every year when the Biennale is finished. People leave back so many structures. So we kept that in mind when we made our pavilion, where we showed them what the whole idea is and how the vertical elements could be taken out and could be used as structural elements for those guys. So it's not a complete waste. There's not going to be it's not going to be transported back. So it was an eye opener for us as well. I think.
Thank you very much, Ruhul. To the idea of patronage and cross subsidy and what's happening with this new art center, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we have sort of a 10-year journey in the studio now, and we, in terms of cross subsidies, we do try our best to seek funding for the projects we do, especially those projects that we care about. So we will come up with an idea, we'll see who might be able to finance it. So being very entrepreneurial, not just for clients, but also with the projects that we want to initiate. So I'll use two examples. One would be with the new Coral project that we're going to work in a couple of months' time. is being financed by the Goethe Institute. We pitched together for a competition with the idea, and we were successful. Out of, I think, 30 different projects, Bangladesh was then chosen. And for example, the bamboo play space, we did a lot of cross kind of, lots of volunteers were involved. We financed the materials and the artisans and our time. And the land was secured by the charity director. And so there's lots of multiple ways of doing any one project, I think. But in terms of the wider studio, we've sort of firmly believed that actually, because we've taken a school of thought kind of position, that we do have to continue teaching, we do have to keep on researching, we do have to keep on engaging as well, as much as we also need to, break even and pay the bills and pay staff. So we've taken risks, and I think some of these risks have, been rewarded, some have not. And I think, so my background is sort of more strategic planning. Arfin is much the architect. There's a few other people who are not architects in the studio. And I think because we are a mixed multi-discipline kind of heads, we can sort of, really not only just think about the architecture in the end, because we then are able to think about strategic planning issues and visioning what the studio looks like, as much as, a vision for a very, for the bamboo, what the bamboo play space might be. Yeah. So it's not easy. I think it's really, really hard. And I think people really, if they want to do it, they've got to do it, and they've got to really push themselves, I think, beyond to make it happen.
Thank you. I'm going to pull one question from the chat, and then I'm going to hand it over to Devashri. But the question is from Ian Lowe. I know he's writing and watching this from South Africa. And his question is, what reflections do both presenters have on transforming, expanding nature of professional practice, which you've partly answered because your work shows that. But the real question I'd like you to very briefly respond on, how well can future education, so which is how did your education prepare you for the kind of practices you're engaged with, or how can future education prepare one for this form of engagement? Salman?
I think that being in a studio environment is the beginning where you work together on ideas, and I think that is where all of this starts, like a melting pot of ideas. So it starts from there, but like product design is something that we didn't really learn at school. It is something which we stumbled upon and worked together on. So I think that it is if we think about it, I don't think that we're really teaching students how to collaborate, and more projects like that need to happen. And even when I've been involved in academia and teaching at Karachi University and at Indus Valley, we try to promote that, and also working together to build as a team, because that is what architecture really is, and that is what our firm is all about, where we work together and work with other people and form teams and react to what is required. So I think that future practices should really think about collaboration more, and even like schools need to teach that, and they need to be more interaction.
Okay, Ruhul, any reflections?
Yeah, a couple. I think one is like the role of the Institute of Architects, the role of architecture schools. I think, at least in Bangladesh, is improving, but it needs to push itself even further in terms of the wider social, climate, environmental issues. And I think one of the challenges there is the structure of the university programs are very much sort of old school still, so they haven't really been expanded on and sort of innovated in terms of recent ways. But I think something like BRAC is doing very, very well in terms of the avant-garde kind of teaching practices they've got in there. And a couple of other schools are doing that too now. But and then the other thing would be, when we ourselves are also teaching, we want young architects, young students to engage with our processes. We do not want to be gatekeepers. So we really want to share as much as we can in terms of the processes we have. So when we're, for example, the bamboo project, we spent 6 weeks, we spent 10 weeks teaching a cohort of students about methods, about research, about processes. And then we spent another week doing the design challenge where architecture students were very much involved in the whole process. Again, coming up with methods, helping them guide them as well. And I think more of that, of course, is what's needed in the wider public realm kind of architecture space. I don't know if there's any other reflections on that.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, that's very helpful. That's very helpful. Thank you. Devashri, I'm going to hand it over to you to ask a few questions. From the chat too, you can pull things.
Yes. Thank you so much for presenting your work. And these were very insightful dives into both your practices. In the case of Coalesce, what I'm curious to know is that while you've engaged in the public realm through your pavilions, but it's been in an exported context, so to say, and I just want to know if you've tried to engage in the public realm or through public spaces in the context of Karachi, and if you faced any challenges while trying to do so, and if you're interested in engaging more within Karachi in the public realm. And in the case of Paraa, I'm curious to know if you mentioned that you try to find funding and advocate for certain projects, but I wanted to know what was your process of identifying certain kind of needs in the communities, while both the projects you presented, there was a charity involved and there was a kind of program already identified. Are there such cases where through your communication with the community there are new problems, new needs that have come up that you have pursued, and how have you gone about doing that? Thank you.
To answer your question, we do actually want to get involved more in public spaces, and you're absolutely right that we got a chance to showcase that in Venice. But there are a lot of the restrictions that we face, especially in the public sector, because not a lot of spaces are designed. That is what we showed in the pavilion, that what the space really belongs to, and there are lots of red lines, and especially in a city like Karachi, where the issue lies more in policy making, and what we really expressed in our pavilion, what we tried to raise awareness was about how these informal settlements are working, and why, as a result, these informal settlements are working like that. So it was to create and raise awareness. But we are actively involved in a lot of government projects right now, and I think that my first exposure to Venice taught me that, where I went there and saw all of these amazing projects, and especially in the public sector, and really show what architecture can really do. Because since we've started, we've been trying to educate what we're really all about. We're a necessity, not a luxury. We want to design for the masses, and yes, we're looking for every opportunity to do so.
Devashri, you want to add any other questions, or should I?
Yeah, I had just asked Rahul also one question. So
Yeah, sure. Please. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think if there is an example where there's a need that we had to respond to. I think we've been I think it's because we've been working with community for so long now. Some of these communities are old, we've known for a decade. And I think the new project that we're getting into, where we're beginning to understand the needs there in Coral, we did a series of workshops at the end of last year and at the end of the year before, with the Goethe Institute, just to begin to understand what is happening here. And that again was financed by the Goethe Institute, but we put together sort of a month-long series of research workshops with the youth of the community, looking to visualize an architectural idea. And I think when we've been thinking about stuff that we want to do ourselves, or we've been asked to respond to something. So for example, the bamboo play space was both sort of something that we wanted to respond to, but also something that the client also wanted, the charity also wanted, just a nice playground for the kids, and so these kinds of conversations are back and forth, and they change a lot, which is also understandable. So, the initial idea for the bamboo play space was a chicken farm. So, so I think us being the mediator for the children to say, actually, the children don't want a chicken farm, the children want a playground. Maybe you can have some chickens somewhere, but let's not do a chicken farm. And I think that's where I think we have been really sort of dynamic about having these conversations that sort of fire back and respond, with knowledge. So the research that we've done builds the evidence to say, actually, this is what the users wanted. So you don't need to think about anything else. So it's actually the dignity that we want for the homeless women and their children is apparent because they want that as well. They want to be treated with dignity. So we talked a lot about dignity with the client and said, you need to break this building down because you are not treating the users, the people, with dignity. They're not just another number on a NGO form. But I think, yeah, it's hard. But I think we're continuously throwing things out there, and and we respond accordingly.
Devashri, you want to pull one question, or you have any other questions yourself? We've got time for maybe one more question.
Sorry, just a second. Yeah. There's one question by Isaac Matthew. How important is association of a practice to collaborate with an architectural college to subsidize their work, like access to student labor, to helping building ideas that contributes the practice portfolio? Without institutional collaboration, can an architectural practice be able to do so significantly?
I can answer that. And I think because we've been working with students a lot, we took affiliation with a university, but it actually wasn't an architecture school. It was it was an environmental management school. We've been trying to find the right partnership with architecture schools here in Bangladesh, and we've not yet really found the right fit. Universities are businesses, and they need to do what they need to do. But we reach out to the student networks, and often teachers are quite independent of this being X school's kind of project. Students are willing and wanting to get engaged with what we're doing. There's always a big response when we put a challenge out there. In terms of the labor and recognition, and I think the most beautiful thing with a lot of the work we do is that anyone can take the credit. Those who've been involved are referenced, are credited, are able to use that project in their portfolio. So it's not even just our practice portfolio, but all of these volunteers, these students, young emerging students, graduates, are able to showcase this, for either to go abroad or to get jobs elsewhere. But it's a challenge. I think we've been trying to find the right architecture school to partner up with, because I think what we do is beyond what architecture schools can actually often do. And what we propose is much more radical, critical, kind of ethical kind of framing of social justice in architecture. And it requires them to bring in all these other disciplines. So our course structure is not even very much architectural heavy. It's very much about everything else that architects need to do a community project. I think that's where the key is. The content that we produce to teach is not architectural. We are not teaching what architecture school teaches, actually, because that's not necessary. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Salman, any quick thoughts on that, or?
Oh, I think I completely agree with what you can need for a good experience in that matter as well.
Okay, thank you. No, so I think we are kind of running out of time. Thank you, Devashri, for those questions. There are a few other questions in the chat that I'm sorry we couldn't get to, Junaid, Momina, Nimisha. But, I think many of those were answered. The questions, people are interested in knowing where the profession is in terms of climate change and have we done enough local materials. I think implicitly you have answered many of those, and those are discussions in themselves. But we really, really appreciate those questions, which of course get recorded. I also want to kind of, again, thank you, Ruhul and Salman, for taking the time and sharing this with us. As you know, this is an ongoing project, an ongoing conversation. For everyone, March 4th is the next session, which will be, I think the 9th or the 10th session, where we have Sonam Litho from Bhutan and Sadiq Duad from Afghanistan. So again, those are at two ends of South Asia, East and West. And so you're going to get, I think, interesting inputs because they both also share topographies that are similar climatically. We really look forward to that conversation. But this is really an ongoing project, an ongoing conversation. We hope it will sustain, and we hope we also in the process produce a fraternity of architects who are beginning to emerge in these areas. And we hope these conversations be productive. Devashri, thank you very much for being part of this. Pranav, Dhruv, others who have supported this from the South Asia Students Group at the GSD and the Architecture Foundation in India and the Mittal Institute at the South Asia Center at Institute at Harvard University. So thanks to you all for the support. And again, Ruhul and Salman, thank you for taking the time and sharing with us your work and your insights. So look forward to seeing many of you, I hope, on the 4th of March.
Thank you.